It was 1 versus 2 in both conferences, and neither matchup disappointed. Is Donovan Mitchell already in the NBA Superstar Lounge, or is he still waiting to be upgraded? Plus, early NBA trade talks are starting to heat up around Chicago and New Orleans. That's all ahead today on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. That's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'm Doug Branson, host of Locked On Hornets, and your Shot Clock Sherpa, guiding you through the NBA's biggest stories with the help of Locked On's local experts. And with me are two of Locked On's premier national NBA experts from the Locked On Nuggets podcast and senior writer for the Action Network. We have Matt Moore, and from the Locked On Bulls podcast, Hayes. How you guys doing? Nice long break. Feeling good?
Good, man. Turkey was great. Everything's amazing. Ready to get back at it. But the ball last night was incredible.
It was amazing. In fact, we got two showdowns between the best of the East and West that felt more May than December. Let's start with the Cleveland Cavaliers coming back to beat the Boston Celtics, led by an incredible fourth quarter performance from Donovan Mitchell. Now, I want to get to Donovan in just a minute. But first, Matt, how much love are you giving Cleveland for the comeback? Or is there an asterisk to beating Boston because Jaylen Brown, Derek White, both missing from action?
I need to find like a hat that just says contrarian on it because I'm about to do the whole contrarian thing. Look, I'm less impressed with the Cavaliers after this one than I was the one where they lost the game. They came back from being way deep down with the Celtics shooting an unsustainable percentage in the first half, even for them in that first matchup, pulled back into it, showed a lot of good things. In this one, no Jaylen Brown, no Derek White, and yet they're trailing and have to pull off a comeback in the fourth quarter at home. My bigger problem here is that they had 49 three-point attempts, the Celtics did. You cannot win this series if you're looking long-term, if you're going to give up 49 three-point attempts to Boston. The Cavaliers have got to find some way to limit those three-point attempts. If you don't have the matchup problem for Boston, you're going to lose over the course of 7 games. Also, to show you how seriously the Celtics took this, Drew Peterson played. Hayes, do you know who Drew Peterson is? Because I learned he existed yesterday.
Yeah, man, listen, they played great. Cleveland's great. Don't make no mistake about it. But the fact that it took them for this type of comeback at home against a Boston team that were missing 2 important pieces to their roster, you have to throw a little bit of an asterisk on it. But I think overall, like, Cleveland is still going to be a really, really good team in this Eastern Conference. I'm starting to come around a little bit on how far I think they can go, but I'm still not putting them above Boston, especially not after a performance like this.
Well, at least they didn't lose this game. I mean, particularly after losing those back-to-back games to Atlanta, then we would be having an entirely different conversation about Cleveland. Instead, I think a lot of the conversation is going towards praising Donovan Mitchell for what he did in that fourth quarter. That's certainly where Danny Cunningham was on the Locked On Cavaliers podcast. Let's listen to that.
That fourth quarter was one of the best quarters he's played in his time as a member of the Cavs. He had 20 points in the fourth quarter, was perfect on offense. Made all 6 shots that he took, 4 of which were three-pointers. He was the biggest reason why they won this game. And the thing that really stands out to me, and this isn't something that can show up in a box score, this is something that if you watch the Cavs all the time, you know, he has a great sense of knowing when it's time for him to step up, when it's time for him to let someone else step up. Sunday night was absolutely the time for him to step up, and he did it, and he was awesome.
Oh, I love when things don't show up in the box score. And that's where Donovan Mitchell was, according to Danny Cunningham. Where was he, according to Matt and Hayes? Hayes, we'll start with you. Was that Donovan Mitchell's official entry into the MVP conversation and maybe his upgrade into the Superstar Lounge? What's he going to have to do to get there?
I mean, Donovan Mitchell is a star. I don't necessarily label him as a superstar, even though he's absolutely killed my team for like the last 4 years, even before he was a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. But I don't know, like the MVP ladder, I have 2-3 players before I would possibly get to Donovan Mitchell. Like, he's great, make no mistake about it. And what he's able to do as far as taking over games when that Cleveland Cavaliers team needs that scoring punch, it's been consistent, it's been good, it's been great. But I for me to be a superstar, you have to be either so elite offensively or you have to at least be solid on both sides of the ball. And Donovan Mitchell isn't guarding anyone, and maybe that just affects my personal enjoyment of it. But that's my thoughts at least on it.
Come on now, Hayes. We're not talking about defense. We're talking about superstars and MVP, are we? In a league where Steph Curry, James Harden, Nikola Jokic, who was miserable defensively yesterday. Come on now, Hayes. Let's be serious. Look, I think Spidey can get there, but it's going to take consistency. If they wind up with 55 plus wins, and he gets to where it's like 28-8 for him, but like that's what we're talking. The problem for Mitchell is that you have to be awesome in stats every single night, and his team is a little too good for that. Darius Garland's playing a little too well for that. Evan Mobley's playing a little too well for that. They have a really good team, but that's going to cause problems when he's trying to get in this MVP conversation or in superstars. Because when you got Shea and Jokic and Giannis and Tatum, like, he could. Do I think that Donovan Mitchell is as good as Jason Tatum? I do. I think Donovan Mitchell is as good as Jason Tatum. But you have to be able to put up the numbers if you're going to get into that conversation, and I don't know that Mitchell's going to be able to.
All right, well, let's go out west where the Rockets and Thunder kept things close as well. Fred VanVleet's 38 points and crazy rainbow three-point shooting lifted Houston over OKC. Let's head to Lock On Rockets and Thunder for their take on what the win and loss mean for each team.
This was absolutely a statement win, and that statement is the Houston Rockets have arrived. They're the real deal. This was like them exercising some of their earlier season demons. The only loss they've had this season so far by double-digit points was to the Oklahoma City Thunder. That was the only game where the Rockets looked absolutely outclassed. And yes, this is an OKC team that is still missing Chet Holmgren. Yes, they didn't have Alex Caruso. They are still an incredibly talented team. They're still one of the best teams in the association.
This was a game that Houston clearly wanted, and you can tell by their reaction following the game, from their jubilee on the court, from their locker room Instagram lives, and how they've been talking post-game. Like, they clearly wanted this game. The Rockets are still in the business of making statements. They're trying to prove that they've turned the corner. Now, the Thunder, to their credit, got control of this game in the third quarter, got an 8-point lead, but could not maintain through the end of the game. They could not maintain that control.
I've known Rylan Stiles, the host of Locked On Thunder, for a while now, and I think that's the saltiest that I've ever heard him. so much salt, Matt.
Just absolutely mummified with salt. Like, that was unbelievable from Rylan, the amount of angst. These two franchises have such a weird history of them being crossed. Like the Rockets, the Thunder, you've got the James Harden trade. They were both super competitive during those years. They were both like, but they don't necessarily have like these iconic series against each other. I just think it's really fascinating to see these two. I do think that one of the things that's going to key here is Houston needed this win more than OKC did. OKC is at that level. And for me, like, the big takeaway is that they were able to get it done in the clutch. That's a huge factor here. If they're a team without a real number 1A superstar, for them to have different guys like Fred VanVleet that can step up and do it. Dylan Brooks in another game last week. Like, they have guys that can do it. And you can do that by committee for a while, but eventually they're still going to have to find the guy, Hayes.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that the Rockets have arrived yet. Like, can we win a playoff series before we talk about a team arriving? Like, regular season, they're going to win a lot of games. They are. Like, they're a talented team. The defense that they have, they're well coached. They execute well. Dylan Brooks is, like, playing some of his best and most focused basketball. Hasn't really been a problem yet. Like, this is going to be a good team. They're going to beat some really good teams over the course of the season. But, typically with these young teams, when they finally go on that first playoff run, they don't have that type of success to where we can say that they've arrived yet. This is going to be a season of learning how to win, keep winning, and then they're going to have to go through that grueling playoffs that's going to happen there in the Western Conference, and then how they come out on the other side of that and the decisions that they need to make on their roster. Because do they then go after a star? Does somebody step up on a playoff series that looks like, okay, next season, if they can start off where they left off, that they're going to be the star that this team needs to emerge? There's still a lot of questions with the Houston Rockets, but those questions are gaining more and more answers, and I like this team a lot, but they haven't arrived yet. Can't say that.
Hayes,
to be fair,
I love
Hayes.
Yeah,
to be fair, Hayes, the Jackson was 4 when the last time the Rockets won a playoff series. So you can't blame Gatlin.
I love that you mentioned good coaching there, Hayes, because I've got a question about not only the good coaching that we're seeing in Houston, but also Cleveland. Both of these teams that are vying for the top of their respective conferences. A lot of love going to these two coaches. Who deserves more credit? Let's get to that coming up in just a moment. Plus, we've got to talk about some of the NBA trade deadline scuttlebutt. It's already starting. We're in the early NBA trade season, and one of Matt or Hayes' teams is already involved in those discussions. I'll tell you who, coming up after this. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know, with everything going on in life, it's easy to forget to say thank you, not just to the people around us, but to ourselves as well. And as we focus on gratitude and family time this season, I want to take a moment to appreciate the effort we all put in every day. Life is chaotic, and simply doing our best deserves a little recognition. So while you're thanking those special people in your life, don't forget to send a little appreciation your own way. If you've ever thought about therapy, it can be a great way to build positive coping skills, set boundaries, and just generally feel more in control of your life. Therapy isn't only for those dealing with major challenges, it's for anyone who wants to grow and improve as well. BetterHelp makes starting therapy simple. It's entirely online, designed to fit your schedule, and flexible enough to meet your needs. You just fill out a quick questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time, no extra charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free and daily newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com, subscribe, stay up to date with local expert analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shearer, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. So before we leave this conversation about number 1, number 2 in the East and West going at each other, I want to talk about coaching because Kenny Atkinson getting a lot of love for the turnaround in Cleveland and Ime Udoka for helping this Rockets become an absolute defensive menace. Matt, we'll start with you. Which coach do you think deserves more credit for their respective turnaround?
I'm going to go with Kenny Atkinson. I think he's getting more out of the individual guys. Like, we kind of knew that this was bubbling. I think Ime did the work last year of resetting the culture, setting expectations, accountability, those type of things. And this season, it's been a lot of like, hey, Dylan Brooks can shoot now. And like, oh, hey, like Alperen Sengun is still like really good at basketball. And hey, if we just take the ball out of Jalen Green's hands, good things happen. Like, these things are not exactly super complicated, I don't think. And when you look at it, the Rockets offense is still, it's getting better. It's headed towards being very balanced, but I think it'll probably recede a little bit, and we're going to wind up with them being a little bit more mediocre. The Cavs, on the other hand, are probably going to wind up top 10 to top 5 in both offense and defense. Atkinson's gotten the most out of not only the starters, getting Darius Garland back on track, getting Evan Mobley to take a leap, but getting great minutes out of Karis LeVert, getting great minutes out of all the bench players. So I'll go with Atkinson for now.
I love the job that Atkinson has done, especially after how like the Brooklyn situation ended and how the public view on him at that point in time. But I'm going to give this one to Ime Udoka in Houston because there's so many young pieces playing so good, and that could be hard to get everybody on the same page, playing selfish basketball. Yeah, a lot of that groundwork was set last year, but I just look like and incorporating the veterans and Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks and those type of things. Like, he's done a really good job with players that haven't really done a lot of winning yet in their career. Like, yeah, they've shown like individual success and they had that great run at the end of last season, but like they started off this season kind of on those same vibes. And I think that points towards coaching. And I like so many of the young players here and the fact that they're just playing good basketball. And that's, listen, as a Bulls fan, we got a lot of talented young players that are playing crappy basketball. So I appreciate young players that are playing good basketball.
Cavs and the Rockets moving in the right direction, coaching a lot to do with it. Let's move to some teams that are moving in the wrong direction and maybe need to consult their GMs on some trade options. February coming faster than you think for NBA teams looking to make deals. We've got new reporting from Mark Stein on his Substack, who writes that there is, quote, a confidence emanating from the Windy City that the Bulls believe they will strike at least one significant deal before the February 6th trade deadline to shed at least one high-profile veteran from the roster, unquote. Jake Fisher also having the Bulls making Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, and Lonzo Ball available Matt, who should be most interested in what Chicago is offering?
It's going to have to be a three-way deal for Levine and Vucevic. Like, you're going to need to find a team that's like, we need this upgrade. We'll move pieces around, and teams that are willing to take on the money. It's going to be too hard trying to find somebody to take on the size of these contracts. I think you want to look at teams that are like, we have to do something pretty drastic. Sacramento is a name I would keep an eye on. I don't know what that structure of that deal is going to be, but Sacramento and Chicago talked a lot over the summer, and that's how they wound up with DeMar DeRozan. And obviously, like, there's a relationship there. Now, I don't know if they necessarily want to go in that direction. Sacramento's got its own problems. And then you got New Orleans. I think New Orleans, if they get people back and are like, we're going to try and salvage the season, Vucevic makes a little bit of sense there. They have some contracts they can offload. I would keep an eye on Sacramento and New Orleans for Chicago.
I'm looking at the Lakers and the Orlando Magic to make separate deals for some of the Bulls pieces. I think, and maybe even the Milwaukee Bucks for a smaller deal like Torrey Craig. But the Lakers are always going to be desperate and thirsty. And I think that they can have the pieces that they can put together. It just comes down to, are the Bulls interested in not getting picks into 2029 and 2031? The one benefit of that is that at that point, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, even Zach LaVine, if that's who they acquire, will all be off the books by then by either one of those first round picks. So maybe the Bulls look at it as a beneficial thing there. We know that the Bulls have enough generational incompetence to just take anything that they're offered at some point in time. So that, and then the Orlando Magic, I think, is an interesting team to watch as well, because they can put together salaries to make a big move. It's just if they want to do something that drastic, or just wait to see how Franz and Paolo look together once they're both on the court. And
if the Bulls want to make a drastic move and move some of these pieces, it might be difficult unless they're willing to give up some of their good young pieces like Dosunmu, Kobe White. Is there a risk of overcompensating, Hayes, into a Washington Wizards kind of situation for the Bulls, or should that be the goal?
Yes, and it's funny that you mentioned that was my topic on Locked On Bulls today. I'm worried that this front office is going to overcompensate for the decisions that they missed out on in previous trade deadlines to try to go all in on this trade deadline. And they're going to be sitting there not only losing some veteran pieces in Zach and Vooch, who are having some of their best years right now, but then on top of that, attaching a young guy who's going to go to a better system, a better developed team, and they're going to turn into a star. That's always the threat here with the Chicago Bulls. That's why I label it generational incompetence. They can't get right. The Bulls can't get right. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they can't get right because of ownership. Like, if this is the path that they're taking, that's trying to make ownership happy to retain jobs. And that's like always going to be my return on this. It's just like, as long as ownership is looking to save money and just pinch out the revenue for a playoff series, you're going to be stuck in this situation. That no franchise in the NBA needs new ownership more than the Chicago Bulls.
Okay, big changes could also be on the horizon in New Orleans. Brandon Ingram's recent move from his previous agency to Klutch Sports has raised some eyebrows. Could he be positioning himself for a jump to a major market, maybe like Los Angeles? Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans says something has to give with a roster that isn't playing the style that they want to play.
This team, in terms of roster, is not built to play the way they want. And that makes it also feel like it's only going to get worse before things get better, whenever that's going to be. You know, they had an openly stated goal of, let's take 43s per game. Zion Williamson has a usage rate of 35% and Ingram at 31. Right there, you know, and those two guys share the court a lot. That's over 60% of your possessions are being used by those two guys. Zion doesn't shoot threes. Ingram doesn't shoot enough threes, though he's trying this year, to his credit. So if those guys are using the majority of your possessions, 2/3, right? It's 66% between those two. You're not going to take a ton of threes because that's not in their bag. It's not what they do.
Okay, big deal, not a big deal. Brandon Ingram moving to Klutch. Zion left his agency, still waiting to see where he lands. Is this a big deal, Matt?
It's a massive deal. Locked On Pelicans is going to try and tell you it's not a big deal. It's a massive deal. You do not join Klutch Sports to keep things copacetic and calm. You do not join Klutch Sports for it to be like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm just wanted to shore up a new deal. That is not what you do. You join Klutch Sports because you want to disrupt the market and you want to be able to generate what you're trying to generate movement towards the move you want. And Klutch Sports is notoriously heavy-handed with their approach in these type of things. like they're going to cause a ruckus. There's going to be media leaks. There's going to be talk of them going, that he will be tied to Los Angeles. He'll be tied to these larger markets. There'll be conversations about what he wants. The Pelicans have been down this road before. Like, what happened the last time your franchise star signed with Klutch Sports? What happened? You wound up with Brandon Ingram. So, like, the problem here is you're going to wind up in these kind of situations where the only way that this ends is badly for everybody involved. The Pelicans, Ingram, and whoever winds up with Ingram.
Yeah, Klutch Sports, I think the most calm situation that maybe there was with Klutch Sports is maybe when Zach signed with them and then re-signed with the Bulls without even interviewing for another team. But then that quickly came down when 6 months later, everybody, like, he wanted out of there reportedly, and it's been a trade calamity since then. Like, no, you don't sign with Klutch Sports and everything just goes smooth. You don't do this, especially in the specific situation where Brandon Ingram is in on a roster on a franchise that clearly wants to move on from him and make some sense of the roster. No, this it may be calm now, but it's just the calm before the storm, because best believe it's going to get even more interesting there in New Orleans.
And maybe New Orleans ends up with Anthony Davis again. I mean, you never know. Time is a flat circle. It all goes back. Who knows? All right, we'll keep an eye on it. Coming up on the Locked On NBA podcast, who went harder this weekend? Everybody was competing over the long holiday weekend, and a lot of amazing performances from some freak athletes. We will ask who went harder coming up. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I don't know if you can get prop bets on if there will be a in-game or post-game brawl, but it's pretty good odds lately in football. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We are a quarter of the way into the season now, so the initial adrenaline hit of the start of the season is starting to wear off, and now the difference between wins and losses can come down to which team has a little bit extra, which player, which team can go a little bit harder. So that's our game today to end the show. Who went harder this weekend? And we're going to start with two guys that we've already talked about, Donovan Mitchell, Fred VanVleet. Very quickly on these two, who clutched harder this weekend, Matt?
I'll go with Donovan Mitchell. Fred VanVleet made a really fun Rainbow 3 desperation at the buzzer to help give the Rockets this statement win. But I will go with Donovan Mitchell, who's actually going up against, Boston, big time moment, needed to spark a comeback. And you need to see this from Mitchell this season. He's kind of taken a backseat a little bit to let the rest of the team go. And for him to take over the way that he did, I'll give it to Spida here.
Hayes.
Yeah, Donovan Mitchell here all the way. I think for all the reasons Matt laid out there, bigger stage, bigger moment, better competition, I'm giving it to Donovan Mitchell.
Okay, next up, who got exposed harder this weekend? Denver's defense giving up a 50-40 night to the Clippers while getting sliced and diced by James Harden, or Steve Kerr's rotation choices? Now, before you answer, let's head out to Locked On Warriors for a little bit more insight into these rotation choices.
13 Warriors played in the first 14 minutes. Essentially, in a quarter, the Warriors went with 13 guys out there. If you have an issue with that, you should. You should have an issue with that because it's not conducive to players getting in rhythm. Even Steph Curry mentioned it. When asked if the rotation needed to be shortened directly after the game by Slater, he said, quote, "We need to be a little more predictable on our night-to-night rotations." So why is Moses Moody going for 15 minutes one game and 3 minutes the next? Why is Anderson going for 21 games, 7 the next? Why are you trying to push all the right buttons and be the smartest man in the room? Instead, trust your guys.
Okay, Hayes, you're up first. Denver's defense or Steve Kerr? Who got exposed harder this weekend?
Steve Kerr by far, because he should be better than that. He should be smarter than that. He's. I look at Steve Kerr as one of the best coaches in this league, and ultimately, like when you look at it, it's like, what are we doing here, Steve? Like don't get me wrong, Denver's defense is there, but it's like we already knew about Denver's defense. I'm not shocked by that. I'm always shocked when Steve Kerr just makes some bad decisions because he's generally such a smart coach. So I'm going Steve Kerr.
I'll go with Denver because, like, look, everyone loved it when Kerr was coming up with this new style and innovating. We heard from Locked On Warriors about how this team is a contender, and look what they're doing. Oh, no. Oh, that's right. They're no longer shooting like 57% from three-point range, and now they're just the Warriors again. Okay. Shocker. Meanwhile, the problem with Denver is that Denver is somehow bad and lazy. Like, you could be a bad defense if you try hard, and you could be a lazy defense if you're really good. Denver's both bad and lazy. They act like they're above this. Nikola Jokic's coverage at the level of the screen last night was reprehensible. It was basically just like, please, James Harden, please just absolutely destroy my coverage by having this wide open bounce pass that's going to open up 3-point looks. Denver loses the math game on all of these games. They're just getting absolutely blown out from 3-point range because they cannot make the rotations and coverage necessary because of an effort problem with their guys. To me, it's got to be Denver. Steve Kerr looking for solutions is a good thing because the roster's not that good.
And they did. I don't think they came up in our trade discussion in the last segment, but maybe they should. Maybe we'll have to talk about that if they keep losing. They're, I think, 4 in a row now. If they keep losing, they're definitely going to have to either look for an answer for another starter or possibly bench. But that's a debate for another day. Let's keep going. Who freaked harder? Giannis getting his first career 40-point triple-double. That's crazy to me. How is that the first one?
Who is it over, Doug?
Over the Washington Wizards, or was it Victor Wembanyama, 34 points, 14 rebounds, 11 assists, 5 3-pointers made, 3 blocks in a triple-double in his win? Who freaked harder, Matt?
You got the note in here, the Wemby. He's the 4th player to record a 30-plus point triple-double before turning 21, alongside Luka, LeBron, and De'Aaron Fox. And he's the 3rd player to record a 30-plus 10-plus rebound, 10-plus assist, 5-plus three-pointers, 3-plus block line, joining James Harden and Vince Carter. I will go with Wembanyama because he did it versus an actual NBA team. And when you do it versus an actual NBA team, you get more credit. Hayes, I do not, again, your stat line performances versus the Washington Wizards should not count in NBA history.
Hayes, stand up for your Midwest guy.
I'm not doing it. Not in this case. No, yeah, it's against the Wizards. Come on now. I'm sure that with effort and enough Gatorade, I could put up 25 against the Washington Wizards. Just give me enough time to do it. No, it's definitely Wemby. Wemby did it. Sabonis was playing. Sabonis wasn't playing. Maybe that'll change some things. But what Wemby did is special. I mean, listen. Wemby's just a freak of nature in general. So we're talking about who freaked harder. It's definitely going to be Wemby at any point in time, which is a wild line that just came out of my mouth. That's crazy, but it's still true. Okay,
well, we just talked about the Wizards, so we'll stay with the Wizards. Who tanked harder this weekend? Was it the Washington Wizards who have now lost 14 straight, all by 9+ points? That's the first team in NBA history to do that. They are in the bottom 10 of the 4 factors on both offense and defense. If that holds, that would be a first. Not the process Sixers, not my beloved 7-59 Bobcats. No one has managed to do that across a season. So that's a lot, okay? And you might be saying to yourself, how could anyone tank harder than that? Well, who tanked harder, the Wizards or Will Hardy, coach of the Utah Jazz, calling timeout on his own player's go-ahead bucket against the Los Angeles Lakers? Hayes, you're first up. Who tanked harder?
I saw it. Come on, I saw that. How do you call a timeout on your own player? That's the hardest tanking I've ever seen in my life. The Wizards are just a terrible basketball team. Make no mistake about it. They don't have to try to be bad. They're going to be bad regardless. But calling a timeout on your own. Come on, that's the most outright. Like the NBA, as much as the NBA wants to be on competitions and everything like that, there should be a fine for that. Somebody should be getting fined.
Investigation, shenanigans.
See, I caught Will Hardy's post-game press conference because I was very amused by that ending, and you kind of feel for him. Like he feels it, and this I've talked about this before. When coaches feel like they've let their players down, that is the worst that you could possibly get, and Hardy's struggling. He had such a good first season and it's been rough since then. And he genuinely felt awful about costing Colin Sexton that opportunity. And I do think that it was completely unintentional. I honestly think he just panicked in the moment, didn't think he had the angle. He needs to trust his guys there. But like, what are we talking about here? Like, look at this Wizards team. Here's the thing. You look at the Wizards, and it's not like I look down that roster and I'm like, who are these guys? I'm not. I'm like, oh, I know that guy. Like, he's pretty good. And then you watch them together, and like, I will turn my head to go get a snack and come back, and I'm like, oh, they just gave up a 17-2 run. Like, the Wizards are prolific, and I applaud their efforts to capture the flag.
It has been a year for NBA coaches calling inexplicable timeouts. We remember the Spoelstra timeout that cost the Miami Heat a victory. It's also a year for coaches in general. The like cutaway to the coach close up after the blunder, like Eberflus in Chicago after not being able to. I'm sorry, Hayes. I just sideswiped you there. But like the cutaway, the close up to Hardy after that, he was like just a pain on his face, and Spoelstra too when it happened to him. Those are interesting moments at the highest level of sport. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On NBA podcast. Coming up tomorrow, we got to do some cup talk. We've already got a team clinching, and there are a lot of different situations for other teams to clinch. We'll run through it all tomorrow. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Locked On NBA wherever you get podcasts, including on YouTube. Thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Enjoy tonight's action. Make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA Game Time on this feed. They're recapping every single game, every single night. Be kind to each other. We're going to see you right back here on Tuesday's edition of Locked On NBA.